Okay, Internet, time to do battle. Rather than go on and talking about why difficulty sliders aren't woke or a lazy design, why don't we just tackle the angles, look at the sliders themselves, and prove it? Okay, so first off, damage to player. Now, a lot of people are going to say, dude, this is simple. Slayer, Doom Man goes in, takes more damage when it's turned up. Yeah, okay, what about the other angles? First of all, this teaches the player bad habits, tanking habits, that they cannot pull off in Nightmare. So they see a Cybermancubus, they run up, they do the Blood Punch, they do the SSG Ballista, whatever combo in the Dark Ages, and they get into this habit, ingrained in their head. These bad habits become their norm, and then when they start cranking up the difficulty, they're like, hey, I want to beat Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare. They do these same things over and over again because that's what they've taught themselves it's okay to do in lower difficulties. It's more than just taking damage, and it's more than just that defensively. You don't learn the mechanics of the game. You don't learn how to falter. You don't learn how to make space, situational awareness, pay attention to what's behind you, in front of you, because you don't have to. You don't need to. And you know what? In a way, that's okay, because if you're a newer player or you're starting off with something and you don't want to have 50 different things coming at you at once, I often tell people when I'm teaching through videos and other combat mechanics and things to focus on one thing at a time. If you don't use your chainsaw enough, focus on that, make it your primary learning point, and then once that's down pat, once that's committed to memory, move on to something else, and you'll find that as you learn that second thing, that first one comes natural. So when you learn these bad habits over months, over years of playing, and you have to suddenly switch it off in your head, anybody that it just stays up way too late like me understands it is hard to get up early because of the habits we've ingrained in ourselves, doom scrolling Reddit or watching my channel, and it is hard to break. It takes like months to do it. And so when they go into Nightmare, it's not just defensively that they run into these issues, but offensively too. They get sloppy once their focus can't just be on combos, and this is where the sliders come into play, but evasion and situational awareness. If you're a tank and it doesn't matter how much damage you take, you're going to just focus on those awesome combos, the quick switching and the so cool stuff, and by the time you move up to Nightmare, you're like, oh, my brain power is now split between defense and offense, and I have to relearn all of these things and focus on everything now. But if you've learned those combos, hopefully they are back to the habits ingrained within your head and your playing abilities and your fingers, and they just come natural over time as well. So yeah, it's a whole lot more than Doom Man takes more damage when you do a damage to player slider. You focus on the aspects of combat of bad habits and different offensive and defensive abilities. It's so much deeper. Damage to demons is an interesting one because, yeah, most people are like, turn it up to the max, kill them in one hit, too easy, lame, game over, whatever. And here's the thing about that. If you can crank it down, then you're creating bullet sponges, and that's not great design either. How many times have you fought an enemy and you're like, will you just die? But you won't because you suck. Well, you ate up all my ammo and now I'm fed up with the game and I quit and I install it. Okay, maybe not that extreme. But what I'm trying to say is that it takes so long to kill and the time to kill the enemy is high, the DPS is low. So when you want to ideally balance this, Hurt Me Plenty by default says 125%, but when you turn it up too much, you kill the enemies too quickly. You don't really have time to learn those combos. You don't have any purpose to learn them because you just mouse 1, WE, whatever to move forward, and you just take them out. But then, like I said, on the same hand, you don't want to take too many kills to kill them. Too many kills to kill them? Too many hits to kill them? Too many bullets. Right. So we have a couple stats that we have to look at here, and a lot of people get this mixed up as well. You have DPS, damage per second, which is how much damage you do in a second. DPH, which is damage per hit. That matters a lot too, because if you have 10,000 damage per hit, but the damage per second is low, yeah, you're doing a lot per hit, but it's taking you a lot of time to get that damage in, and you might have overkill. This is where TTK, time to kill, comes into play. Let's say an enemy has 100 health, and your shot does 99 damage, and each shot takes 2 seconds. Effectively takes 4 seconds to kill that enemy, because you have 99 plus 99 for the total 100 damage. You'll have overkill. You have a Pyrrhic victory. That is when you expend more resources and use up more cost than what you make back. So if you spend $10,000 to defeat your enemy, but you only make $2 back, that's a Pyrrhic victory. So the reason that's important is because if you have 99 damage and you take 2 seconds to do that, you are honestly better off in taking a 50 damage gun that takes 1 second per shot, because 50-50 is 100, you've just taken out that enemy in 2 seconds. What does my rambling have to do with anything? Let me tell you, glad you asked. So when it comes to damage to demons, that really matters because you are now screwing with the time to kill the enemy, even though it scales equally with your other weapons, you still have to consider that now this enemy lasts longer on the battlefield and continues to pose a threat simply because he is alive, and that means I need to move my focus on other enemies too, because I need to kill them too. So you want to think about the best way to get the enemy off the battlefield, the time to kill him, and which weapons you can use to factor that in. And with damage to demons cranked up to be a bullet sponge, that time is going to be a lot more, so you have to be able to survive longer and use your skills to be able to live, which also, this is so interesting to me. When it comes into Ultra Nightmare, the longer you stay alive on the battlefield, the longer you're in a fight, the more your nerves tense up, the more nervous you get, like, I should be winning right now, I have to survive this, I'm dodging more and I'm dodging more and I'm getting more nervous, maybe they're going to hit me eventually, and so your mental state gets out of whack the longer you stay into a fight. You ever done that? I know I have. You're like, when is Sammer going to die? And you have to continue fighting him, and your nerves get shot. Well, then your physical abilities get shot too. Your hands get tired, and then you begin to worry. Your palms get sweaty, knees weak, arms, whatever, mom spaghetti, whatever. And then you're like, oh, I'm not playing as well as I used to because my keyboard's all sweaty now. There's so many different depth things you can consider. And all this has just been 2 sliders, damage to player, damage to demons, and it's a lot deeper than people give it credit for. This is not some woke design or whatever stupid term people are using. I mean, we wouldn't even want to continue with enemy projectile speed. Dusk does this very well. There's a difficulty called accessible, and somebody picked on the developer, Dave Szymanski, for doing it when that design was for his cousin who has a disability and still wanted to play. So enemy projectile speed ties in as well to damage to demons, damage to player, because the more and the faster the shots come out by the enemies, the higher DPS, the lower time, the higher time, faster time to kill they have to get rid of you. So it's inverse, right, of your damage to demons and your speed. You now have to have faster reaction time. This is a shoot 'em up that you get to move horizontally, maybe a little bit of vertically in, and with the enemies are shooting faster, your tension is going to be higher in dodging, because the more you see out on the battlefield at once, if it's going fast, you're going to be nervous and you're going to screw up if you don't have that time under your belt. A lot of people, this is super cool too, you look at Ultra Nightmare players and they're like, how can I be that person? They make it look so easy. Do they not even care? Are they not even nervous? And no, they're not, because they've spent hours and hours into a game, learning those mechanics and getting comfortable with those bad situations. How do they keep calm when there's a million demons around them? Because they've been there before. They have fought that fight 10 million times, and it doesn't bother them anymore because they have seen that experience and they have fought that fight 1,000 times, and they know it. They've committed it to memory, physically, mentally, emotionally, and they have huge guts in that fight. Do you see what happens when I don't have a script and I just have an outline? I begin to go off on these tangents of Doom combat, and I love this stuff so much. So we look at enemy projectile speed, and slowing it down, speeding it up is a great way to just really fine-tune the battle, because if you really want to stay strong, if you feel like your combos are on point, you want to keep your damage that way, you can go to the enemy projectile speed. So if you're like, yeah man, my dodging sucks, you can really start with the chainsaw example earlier, turn it down, dial it up until you eventually get to the level you're comfortable with. Maybe the base game they shoot too slow and you're just a speed demon, you're extremely talented like American Eagle or anybody that's super good at the game. It doesn't mean that the base game difficulty sucks. They have these baseline levels and let you tweak it to how you want it to be. Enemy aggression slider is super interesting to me because it is reminiscent of the token system. I've interviewed Hugo about this, I've talked about this in videos. More or less, just to keep it a super simple level for this video, that is how many attacks an enemy has. They have light and heavy tokens that they can trade off between each other. So if an imp is at the front of the battlefield beside the Slayer, he might take a token from the enemy in the back. They have light attacks, which are the super quick, easy, light jabs, and they have the super heavy uppercuts that are just extreme blast. The higher difficulty you go, and this is probably what they're going to do and what this slider really means, the more tokens that are out on the field at once, and the more enemies can use them at once. So you might have like a limit of 2 light and 1 heavy token on easy mode, where you can use like 1 or 2 at the same time, to where on hard mode, you might have like 3 and 4, and they can use more of those tokens, more attacks on the battlefield at once. Now this synergizes really well with the enemy projectile speed, because if you find that you like all those projectiles out on the field at once, but they're moving a little too fast, dial down that projectile speed. If you're like, hey, I don't want this many on the field at once, it's too much to focus on, but I have the agility to dodge them, then you turn up the speed and down the aggression. I just do not understand for the freaking life of me how this is a bad design or how this is a bad implementation, because I used to have to do all this stuff in console commands in Doom Eternal, and now everybody has it. Now console players, God rest their soul, have the ability to do what we've been doing for years now. I commend id Software for that. And maybe if I get this game on my son's Switch, then I'll be able to do the same thing as well, because I'm going to need it. I'm going to need it. The Parry Window is so nice. And by the way, I was kidding about console because I play Switch all the time. The Parry Window is so nice because it's a key game mechanic. We're going to have to learn this so much. And it ties in with the projectile speed, knowing your reaction time to be able to see, okay, here's the thing. You have to see the enemy move and realize your brain has to process, hey, this enemy is coming in for X or Y attack, and I have to hit my button at this point to be able to dodge it. And each enemy is going to have different thresholds, different windows, I imagine. And so you have to be able to focus on your brain telling you which one you need to do at which point in time. So if that's a lot to manage, you can be like, hey, I'm really comfortable with X enemy, but Y enemy bothers me. Maybe at this point in the game I can turn it up since I know this enemy's coming. Maybe at this point I can turn it down since I'm pretty comfortable with this fight. And maybe this battlefield has 100 enemies since there seems to be no cap, and I can really feel not comfortable with having that many. You can tie it in with aggression, with projectile speed, with damage. You can tweak it to be your own game. Now, I don't think, hear me out, if you're just doing the dishes or whatever and you're just listening, come back and listen to me here, please. Somebody actually was doing the dishes when they watched the video and they were freaked out that I called them out for it. This is important because, back to the chainsaw example, if this is something you are struggling with, dial it down and bring it on up. Create your own game experience, but it's important when you create your experience that this is not going to be enough just for extreme replayability. Yeah, you're going to be able to tweak these and dive into it over and over again, but I still feel like that we need some more options, like the DLCs that are coming, or maybe some extra challenges, like not just no upgrades or whatever, to really help the longevity push further. But this is absolutely a step in the right direction, being able to narrow down these essential game mechanics and each little facet of combat to tweak to your own desire of play. Maybe you're feeling extra sweaty one day, so you dial it all up. Maybe you want to just relax after a hard day of work, can relate, and you dial it back down. You have the freedom. You have the power to do whatever the heck you want to do. Daze Duration. Now, we have the old runes, Dazed and Confused, of that day, but this is just another aspect of combat to say, hey, it'll tie in with the resource management. Maybe I am good at getting enemies in stagger, maybe I have some problems with it, and maybe I need to just focus on being able to glory kill them, or the new version of the glory kills, in time. So a lot of folks have issues with the Doom Eternal system, with the glory kills. They just have some struggles with it, especially some of the challenges, since the animation states are a little funky there. Well, what if you could just pick what you wanted? Maybe you want an extra challenge and you want to say, hey, I don't want to bother with these glory kills. Let's just make everything real quick. Maybe you want to extend it and say, hey, I want to focus on getting the enemies into the glory kill state. Maybe I want to focus on other parts of combat. You have the power to do that. And of course, we have to talk about game speed and resource values. The resource values tie into the Daze Duration because you now get to decide how much you want to recover and how much you want to get back. This means you have to focus. If you're going to be lower ammo, how can I best utilize the ammo that I'm given in order to make the fight the best way that I can? Maybe use up too much ammo. Maybe I want to dial it back and give myself a challenge to see how I can do more melee focused. The resource values, maybe I'm getting too much health back and this is too easy for the game. Maybe I'm really good at glory kills or whatever, and it's just too easy. You can turn it down, you can fit it to what you want to, tying in with the Daze Duration. Maybe you want to make high resources, low days time to give yourself an extra challenge, like I got to get there fast and I get a great reward. See how much you can customize the game? You can make your own little miniature challenges. Or maybe you want to have a long days duration and low resource value, signifying that, hey, these enemies are going to be available for a long time, but they're not that much worth it. Maybe I want to pile them all up together to make like an armor pool like in Eternal, and just really have all this customization. Now, game speed is going to be interesting because there's a command for timescale in some of the older Doom Engine game stuff, to where if you want to have faster combat, if you feel like the game itself is too slow, you can dial it up. There's a beautiful game out there, I love it so much, called Left 4 Dead 2. It's not the fastest moving game, but it's still very talented and skilled in its way because you aren't focused on so much of essential like crazy fast movement like Eternal, but there is still very accurate and time-based movements that you need to learn, like cutting a smoker tongue if you played the game, to really dial that in. So maybe you want to focus more and make this not a chill game, but a slower paced, dodge this, hit that, parry that. Maybe you just want to dial it all up to the extreme and say I want to do a full-on arcade shoot 'em up. The game speed will let you do that. In addition to everything else we've talked about today, you get to decide your fate. You get to practice what you want to do. You get to make the game easier or harder, and you get to tone it to whatever the heck you want to tone it to. I just fail to see how this is a bad update, a bad addition to the game. And it's right out the gate. We didn't have to wait for modding. It's right here from the start. Maybe they'll add to it. And you know what? That little menu with all the sliders on it looks like you could scroll up and down. Maybe there's more they're not wanting to show us yet. Maybe they tie into the Atlan, the dragon, some weapons, enemies, bosses, things we've not seen yet, and they don't want to show us. The shield saw. There's so many possibilities and customization at our fingertips now that we didn't have before, especially for console and PC that's not modded. I love it, and I don't see how other people can dislike it, really. What I do know is that when I've talked about this before, I've gotten some heated comments in both directions, either for or against what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is the Doom The Dark Ages soundtrack. Click the video on your screen here if you like this one to see if I'm right or wrong about the soundtrack, and the hot take's there. Thanks for watching.